Hey guys, what's up? It's Rusty here at Live Love Leather, and today we're going to be talking about pattern layout and swivel knife finesse, so stick tuned and see you in the shop. Hey, welcome back to the shop. As I said earlier, today we're going to be talking about two different things. We're going to be talking about pattern transfer as well as swivel knife cuts and cutting out a pattern. So we need a few things before we start doing our pattern transfer, which is what we're going to work on first. First things first, we need you to subscribe to this channel and like this video below. The next thing we're going to need is we're going to need a pattern. Now, I'm going to try to put this pattern as a PDF in the description box down below so you can just download it and print it out and practice along right with us. The next thing you're going to need is tracing paper or tracing film. You can pick this up at the local leather store or art store. It's just a plastic film you can draw on. So the next thing you're going to need are 2 pieces of properly cased leather. And if you missed our last video on how to do that, I'm going to link it right here, and I'll also put a link down in the description box right below here. The first piece is going to be about 5x5, 5x4, somewhere in there, just enough so the pattern fits on the leather nicely. The next piece is just a small scrap piece of leather we're going to be using later when we're cutting it out to practice and warm up our swivel knife skills on. So after you got the leather cased and the tracing film and the pattern, you're going to need a pencil to transfer the pattern on, some tape to help you out. I'll show you how that works. The next thing you're going to need is a stylus, a pen, or a pencil, something we can trace the pattern onto the leather with. So let's get over to the bench and we'll start this pattern out. All right, now that we're set up at the bench, the first thing we're going to do is to get the pattern onto the tracing film. And to do this, we're going to cut out a piece of tracing film slightly larger than the pattern itself, like so. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a piece of tape. Now the masking tape, blue tape, whatever works for you, whatever you have around the house. And we're going to put it on the top of the pattern just like that. Hopefully that stays. The next thing we have to do is just trace the pattern onto the tracing film with a pencil. At this point, you want to try to keep the lines fairly exact. It doesn't have to be perfect. You will see me modify some of the lines as we go along because I don't like some of the lines in this pattern. So the reason we use the tape on the top, mine's not sticking real well, but is so we can just take our tracing film and lift it up like that to see if we missed any lines, which I have here. So I'm going to catch that line there. I think I got the rest of them. So 2 things you'll notice about this pattern. The dotted lines, they tell you something. They tell you not to cut there when you're cutting with your swivel knife. You'll see that here in a minute. The next thing you'll see is the shaded parts here on the pattern. I used to do that so I could find the background. It just makes life easier when you're carving out the leather and you have a reference sheet on what is the background and what's not. And you'll see that in a future video here. So I'll continue to draw. As I just said, make sure with these dotted lines, you mark them as a dotted line because they do tell you not to cut there when you're doing your swivel knife cuts. So I think I got the pattern pretty good there. Don't think I missed too many lines. And as you gain experience, missing lines isn't a big deal. You'll be able to add them in as you go. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take off the tracing film. I'm going to grab a new piece of tape. So I got a new piece of tape. It's just Scotch tape. It should stick a little better for me here. And we're going to take the 5x5 or whatever you have piece of leather here, and we're going to lay it down on our bench, and we're going to take our pattern, lay it directly over that. And again, you can take this down just so you can check if you missed any lines. So now all we have to do is trace the pattern again so it gets transferred over onto the leather. And I'm going to do this with a pencil. It's just easier for me to do it that way. And I'll show you a stylus as well. And you can see right here, I actually missed a line, but I know that it should just be like that. So I'll just draw that line right there. So now if you pick up the tracing film, you'll see an indentation on the leather, and it should be slightly darker than the normal leather. Mine's not quite where I'd like it to be usually, but my leather's a little wetter than I usually work it at this stage. Oh, and again, I missed another line, so I'm just going to draw one there. For me, missing a line while tracing isn't a big deal. As you can see, I just add in lines where I think they should go. Time, experience, and life will kind of teach you how to do that. And again, with the dots, make sure you just draw the dots on there so you know not to cut there. And we'll get to that right now. So now that we have our pattern transferred over onto the piece of leather, all we have to do now is cut it out with the swivel knife, and then it's ready to start carving. But first, we need to talk about how to use the swivel knife, and also we need to get warmed up before we start cutting on this pattern here. So this is a swivel knife. You have a couple components. So there's the blade, the barrel, and the saddle. How you hold this swivel knife is you're going to hold the barrel between your thumb and your middle finger here, and you're going to place your index finger in the saddle. What this allows you to do is to steer the swivel knife with these two fingers and put pressure with your index finger. Let's grab our practice piece of leather here, and we're going to talk about how to use the swivel knife. The first thing you need to know about using a swivel knife is how to put it in the leather. You can't just put it flat into the leather. You can't just put it flat in and drag. Nothing will happen. You need to put it in, tilt it back, and then you'll drag and you'll cut the leather. Another thing you need to know is you need to keep the swivel knife completely vertical. You don't want it canted either left or right, because then you'll get an undercut. So you'll want to keep it vertical and then tipped in. So it'll be like that. You might notice I put my ring finger on the blade of the swivel knife as well. It just helps me stabilize the blade a little bit more from all the pressure. So let's practice some swivel knife cuts. The first type of cut you want to practice is a C cut. So again, you're going to put your blade in, tip it. So you're going to put your blade in and tip it, and then make a C, steering it with your fingers, not with your wrist. And once you do that a couple of times on one side, do it the other way. You'll notice you have a strong hand side and a weak hand side when you're cutting with a swivel knife. You'll be more apt to cut one specific way, but over time you'll be able to balance that out, but you'll always have a weak side and a strong side. So after you get some going the other way, you can go ahead and practice some S cuts. And you'll notice all our cuts are at our curve. And you'll want to practice that because with Western floral carving, everything's curved. All your patterns are always curved. There's rarely a time there's a straight line. So I got some that way. Let's go the other way. Again, just practicing both ways. And the next thing you can do is you can practice circles. This will just give you a little bit of practice. And you'll notice I don't try to do a full circle with my swivel knife. It's easier to do 2C cuts. So once you got a couple of those knocked out, and your fingers are kind of warmed up and you're getting used to the pressure, so we can go ahead and grab the real project and start cutting it with the swivel knife. One thing I didn't mention is when you're cutting with your swivel knife, you don't want to put so much force on you're cutting all the way through the leather, but you don't want so little force that you're just scratching the top. You want to go about halfway through. And another thing, as you're working with your swivel knife, you need to have a stroke. This stroke's just a leather stroke, and I use jeweler's rouge, the white stuff, and you put it on the rough side, and then you'll take your knife, drag it across, flip it, drag it across, pick it up, turn your knife again, drag it across, flip it up. Stroking your knife is an extremely important aspect of your swivel knife cuts. If your knife's not sharp, you'll get a drag line, like, hope you can see it. You'll see little ripples in the leather, and that means the knife's not sharp enough. And what happened here was I was actually cutting too deep. So I'm going to go ahead and stroke this knife a little bit, just so it's nice and sharp when I start this project. And I'll stroke it again probably halfway through the project as well, or whenever I feel the knife starting to get dull. One thing to remember when you're stroking is to drag it across and lift it up, and always keep it equal on each side because you don't want to change the blade geometry, and you don't want to roll it like so when you're doing it, because then you'll just knock off the cutting edge you've been stroking on. All right, that should be sharp enough. Let's grab the project here and we'll start working on that. It doesn't really matter where you start your swivel knife cuts. It's just a personal preference. I like to do the long lines, and then I'll come back and do some of the short lines, and then I'll do the flower last. So I'll start cutting now. And if you can see my knife straight up and down, as I go around these corners, it remains straight up and down. And see here, I didn't have enough angle on my swivel knife, so I nicked the leather. That's something you don't want to do. You want to always make sure you have that angle high enough so when you're turning, you're not dragging the blade across the leather. Also, when you're working with your swivel knife, you always want to be pulling it towards your body. If you're pushing it away, you tend to have less control. Some people can get away with it and are really good at it, but as a beginner, I'd always recommend just dragging it right towards your body and just practicing that way. But go ahead, if you want to try pushing it, try pushing it. I did. I think everybody does. And most people find out that dragging it into your body is a lot more controlled. And as you can see here, I missed the line. And I did that on purpose. I didn't like how flat that was, so I went ahead and just cut a line where I thought it looked good. And you can change the pattern as you go if you'd like. That's just the benefit of working with leather and being an artist. It's not 100% concrete, and everybody seems to have a different way of doing things. There we go. We're all cut out now. We're ready to start tooling the leather, but this is still a little wet, as you can tell here. I'd really like to wait for it to dry till it's back to the natural color. And once it does that, you're ready to tool. And I want to thank you for sticking around watching this video. I hope it helped you out. I hope you got a little information out of it. If you did, definitely subscribe, comment below, let us know what you like. We look forward to making more videos for you in the near future here. Have a great day.